educationally. And so I encourage you to have that switch on in the back of your brain somehow, thinking about, well, if I'm in corporate training, or if I'm in teacher education, or if I'm in all these other places, does this mean anything? Well, I think it does, and I'll talk about some ways that I think it does, but personalize it, make it yours, and I'm happy to address any questions as well. I want to begin with a proposition. I want to begin with a proposition about the nature of our business. I don't believe that the nature of our business is delivering information. I don't believe that the nature of our business is inspiring or motivating, as important as that is. And I also don't believe, and this is the real heretical one, I don't believe the nature of our business is to improve the so-called quote-unquote bottom line. I believe the nature of our business actually ties very closely to a scriptural phrase, and that scriptural phrase is preparing hearts. Specifically, preparing hearts for the event that we would call, in religious terminology, that we would call conversion. And we talk a lot about conversion to the gospel, obviously, but really conversion to any ideal or any value. Think of the people you know that really succeed at their chosen field, whether it's entrepreneurial activities, whether it's sports, or whether it's music. There is a deep conversion they have to that value or that ideal that motivates them to do everything else that's necessary and important to excel and exceed their own capacities. They'll find whatever information is necessary. They'll reach deep inside themselves and find those wells of inspiration and motivation. They'll do whatever it takes. And so specifically, while we cannot cause that to happen for people, they've got to reach deep inside themselves, like I said, and obviously in the gospel context, we know that it is very heavily influenced and drawn by the influence of the Holy Ghost to achieve that level of conversion. But we can prepare their hearts. We can help ignite the spark inside of them so that they can then blow on that spark a little bit and hopefully achieve something great, achieve something memorable and absolutely fantastic. This is daunting. This is huge. This is bigger than I think the other things that we typically talk about in terms of any of the other performance improvement or education or instructional design activities. How can we do this? How can we light that spark in people? Well, the nature of the assignment that Dr. Gibbons alluded to, searching the scriptures and finding out really are there clues or things that we can learn about how the Lord does it, and there absolutely are. Specifically, in the experiences of visions and dreams and other heavenly manifestations. These are full sensory experiences that we can read about in the scriptures. Not unlike educational or instructional media. Of course, I'm not suggesting they're exactly the same. There are some very obvious and important differences, but there are also some very intriguing parallels. And so in the presentation today, I want to talk about 4 of these characteristics that we learn about from visionary experiences that have, I think, some important and interesting insights and implications for the business of instructional technology, instructional design, and media design in general. These 4 principles are: first, visionary experiences are intimate and not distant. Second, they are participatory and not passive. Third, they build in people a sense of sacred awe. And fourth, they're very spiritually demanding, and along with that, very emotionally and mentally demanding as well. So first, intimate, not distant. To represent this principle, I've chosen a detail out of Michelangelo's The Creation of Adam. So if you're familiar with the whole painting, this is the hand of the Lord reaching out to pass that spark of life onto Adam, and by representation, really, all of humankind, all of us. It represents that there is warmth and concern and compassion in the Lord's influencing and working with us, that he actually does anything he can to remove unnecessary psychological or emotional barriers. There's no sense of detachment and separation when you look at visionary experiences. I also specifically chose this detail because of how closely it represents a lot of the visionary experiences we read about in the scriptures or in other modern day revelatory concepts. This isn't the account of the first vision that we have in the scriptures, but this is a very important one. A A gentleman who heard Joseph Smith tell the experience of the first vision reported that Joseph said the following: God touched Joseph's eyes with his finger and said, Joseph, this is my beloved son, hear him. As soon as the Lord had touched his eyes with his finger, he immediately saw the Savior. So the way we represent the first vision sometimes of Joseph looking up in the distance and seeing, people almost on the stage doesn't seem to be represented in at least this account. We also have the experience of the brother of Jared in Ether chapter 3, where he prayed to the Lord, touch these stones, O Lord, with thy finger, and prepare them that they may shine forth in darkness. And it came to pass that when the brother of Jared had said these words, behold, the Lord stretched forth his hand and touched the stones one by one with his finger. And the veil was taken from off the eyes of the brother of Jared, and he saw the finger of the Lord. And it was as the finger of a man, like unto flesh and blood. Visionary experiences are personal. They're warm. Even epic visions, they seem to have a real intimate quality to them. We talk a lot about these epic visions like Lehi's dream of the tree of life, as if Lehi were watching a movie. But when we examine the details of these things, we see that Lehi was embedded in the experience. And it came to pass that I beheld a tree whose fruit was desirable to make one happy. And it came to pass that I did go forth and partake of the fruit thereof. So he actually went forth in this vision and took a piece of fruit off a tree. He was embedded in the environment. And as I partook of the fruit thereof, it filled my soul with exceedingly great joy. So, visual media, I believe, instructional media, has analogous means of closing these spiritual and emotional and mental distances, and so increasing the sense of intimacy between a teacher and a student, or a developer and a student, or however you want to phrase it. We can replicate the one-on-one character that visions seem to have, or this closing of distance that visions seem to have, so that even students in large groups can begin to feel that there is a personalized message meant just for them. I've got a few examples that I'd like to show today. Some of these examples you may have seen before, but in any case, whether you're familiar with the example or not, if you've even studied the example formally in another situation or not, please try to frame your thoughts about it in context of this principle that I'm discussing. So again, the first principle of intimacy and not distance. Even in lectures and presentations, we can remove elements that act as visual barriers. This is going to sound very ironic from someone standing behind a podium wearing a suit. But we can remove people from behind podiums, and we can dress them in more casual clothing. I hope at least I'm doing a good job at eliminating institutional language or jargon or technical language that can create a sense of emotional distance. So let's watch this, and I've got a couple of comments.
The reason so many people are opting out of education is because it doesn't feed their spirit. It doesn't feed their energy or their passion. So I think we have to change metaphors. We have to go from what is essentially an industrial model of education, a manufacturing model, which is based on linearity and conformity and batching people. We have to move to a model that is based more on principles of agriculture. We have to recognize that human flourishing is not a mechanical process, it's an organic process. And you cannot predict the outcome of human development. All you can do is, like a farmer, is create the conditions under which they will begin to flourish. So when we look at reforming education and transforming it, it isn't like cloning a system. There are great ones, like KIPS, it's a great system. There are many great models. It's about customizing them to your circumstances and personalizing education to people you're actually teaching.
Obviously, he's a very skilled speaker, but there are some environmental things that I hope you noticed. If you're preparing these types of experiences for others, whether you're a teacher yourself even, notice the headset microphone that allowed him to move freely around the room, maintaining eye contact and a sense of freedom in what he is presenting and what he's doing, allowing him to speak to a very large group, but still maintain a very personal quality. Also, perhaps you didn't notice, there was one shot of the stage, and you could see monitors being lifted up or pointed in his direction around the stage, again allowing him some freedom of movement while still being able to access notes or even potentially a full text version of the speech that he's delivering. Even in filmed presentations or demonstrations, We can create a sense of intimacy by showing close-ups. We can show objects and events from a close instead of rather a distant perspective. If the media is a narrative story, we can show close-ups of people's eyes and smiles. This is one of the most famous scenes of movie history. Let's just watch a moment of it.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. I'm laughing at clouds so dark up above. The sun's in my heart and I'm ready for love. Let the stormy clouds chase everyone from the place. Come on with the rain, I've a smile on my face. I walk down the lane with a happy refrain, just singing, singing in the rain, dancing in the rain. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
When I show this, I look in the audience and I see you smiling. I see you starting to tap your feet. You almost can't help it. Because of the magic that's created, bringing all of the elements of this production together. Even if you're teaching a technical subject, even if your instructional film is of a highly technical nature, can you infuse it with these personal elements that make people respond, that make them happy, that cause them to feel some kind of joy? Locally created media has a very sincere and a personal quality to it as well, even if the production values are often lower than what can be obtained through professional means. You're probably one of the 272 million people, over 272 million people now who have seen this video. This is Charlie Bit My Finger. That's number 4, as of January this year, the number 4 all-time viewed video on YouTube in just its official incarnation. The other 9 of the top 10 are all music videos, just the glitzy, glamorous things. But this one, something about this one causes people, again, just to smile and have fun and feel that they're having a real personal experience.
Charlie. Charlie bit me. Ah. No, Charlie bit me. And that really hurt, Charlie, and it's still hurting.
So Charlie's never been happier in his life. And even his brother, despite being frustrated, you can sense a genuine affection and a genuine warmth between the two. You can't fake that. That's absolutely something you have to capture spontaneously. Interactive media can give an immersive, an insider's perspective. Again, like visions, these epic visions can immerse participants in the event. Interactive media can immerse people into subjects or experiences or ideas and let them see from the inside what this is all about. Don't have time to watch the clip here, but this is Moonbase Alpha. NASA created an interactive simulation about what it's like to be an astronaut on the moon, with the hope that high school kids wouldn't just be excited about space travel, but about science in general. So the first principle, again, intimate and not distant. The second principle is participatory and not passive. So So to represent this principle, I've chosen an altarpiece from a medieval church representing the book of Revelation. We have John the Revelator here, seeing an angel, seeing amazing visionary experiences, and in his case, what's he being asked to do? He's being asked to write them down. Elder David A. Bednar said this: "We primarily are to act, and not only to be acted upon, especially as we seek to obtain and apply spiritual knowledge. Learning by faith requires spiritual, mental, and physical exertion, and not just passive reception." And so the classic example of this from the scriptures is Nephi, the vision of the tree of life that he saw, his version of it. He said, "It came to pass that I saw the heavens open, and an angel came down and stood before me. And he said unto me, Nephi, what beholdest thou?" And Nephi answers the question, and then the angel responds to him. A moment later, the angel said unto me, "Knowest thou the condescension of God?" And Nephi admits, "No, I don't know what that means." And so the angel's response and even the vision at that point changes to answer Nephi's question. And a little later, the angel said unto me, "Knowest thou the meaning of the tree which thy father saw?" And again, Nephi responds, and the angel answers. And this whole experience is shaped based on this interaction, this very personal interaction between Nephi and the angel. But visions are not just question and answer. There are other visionary experiences where the participants are not so much like spectators, they're more like actors in a drama, necessary to the actions being portrayed before them. One example: the Lord spake unto Enoch, and said unto him, "Anoint thine eyes with clay, and wash them, and thou shalt see." So Enoch in the book of Moses is being asked actually to do something, perform an action, a necessary action, without which he could not see the vision that the Lord had for him. And so I believe that interactive media, visual media, can be equally participatory. Not just the participation that asks people to answer multiple choice questions or to click a button on a screen to go to the next page, but true interactivity and true participation that asks them to meaningfully explore choices and meaningfully see and observe and somehow experience the consequences of those choices. Another way of being participatory in interactive media is to allow people, in some sense, to be the main character of a story or a scenario or a situation. So in this example, this is an interactive story actually delivered completely on YouTube.
Got it, mate. How's it going? You all right?
Yeah.
The shank's short. What do you think's going to happen?
Come on, mate.
It's gonna go up tonight, big time. Don't take the knife.
So you make your choice. Do you take the knife or not? What's interesting about this story is whether you choose to take the knife or not, a couple of steps down the story, your character is going to be involved in a serious gang fight. And so the lesson being taught here is not that if you make the right choice, all of your problems are going to magically go away. The lesson is, when you make the right choice, you become the kind of person that can handle problems in the way that you want them handled, instead of being influenced solely by the circumstances around you. So students, people, in this case teenagers, at-risk teenagers especially, but in other situations, let me encourage you to invest people in extracting their own lessons from media, because they've actually had to invest some effort, apply some effort in doing so. Yes?
What would we Google to see this, Jason?
This was called,
It's a choose your own adventure.
it's on YouTube, and it is called something that I'll get to you before the end, before I leave today. I'm sorry, I can't remember offhand. Interactive media, like I said, is a great way of being participatory, but media need not only be interactive to be equally participatory. Watching has this, I think, undeserved reputation of being a passive experience, as does, parenthetically, reading, as does listening to lectures. But watching is only a passive experience when what you're watching is simplistic and trivial. Watching can lead to great emotional and mental investment and participation, even if the physical participation that we sometimes consider a defining characteristic isn't necessarily there. Great stories spark our imagination. Great stories impel us to explore the world through another person's eyes. Imagining what we would do if we were in that situation. Imagining, would we make those same mistakes or even virtuous actions that we see the character making on the screen?
I'm gonna kill you, dragon. I'm gonna cut out your heart and take it to my father. Viking. I am a Viking! I did this.
The virtue there is that honor comes not just from being courageous, but from being loyal and from being a friend. How many of us, how many of our children explored that theme by watching a very entertaining movie? Great stories are participatory also because of the discussion they can prompt. So when it came time to have the discussion with my own children about racism and equality and treating people as equals and being friends with everyone, this is the film that we showed them in preparation actually for a discussion on those same topics. So one scene from the film To Kill a Mockingbird.
Now, gentlemen, in this country, our courts are the great levelers. In our courts, all men are created equal. I'm no idealist to believe firmly in the integrity of our courts and our jury system. That's no ideal to me. It is a living, working reality. I am confident that you gentlemen will review without passion the evidence that you have heard, come to a decision, and restore this man to his family. In the name of God. Duty. In the name of God. Believe.
So we hopefully know how the scene ends. Even though Atticus Finch loses the case, he wins the respect of the entire town. And even his children are being told, stand up, your father's passing through. All of the citizens honoring Atticus Finch because he is the type of person that they wanted to be and couldn't be. And I hope the type of person that we want to be. Let's ask ourselves a question. Do people act on what they observe? Do people apply what they observe? If they do, and I believe that they do, if they pattern their lives, not just because they heard a theory, but because they saw an action in someone else's behavior and found the consequences desirable, if that is true, then watching can be a very participatory experience. The third characteristic, visionary experiences build a sense of sacred awe. And by this I mean that when people experience a vision in the scriptures, they feel astonishment, they feel joy, humility, wonder, even in some cases, shock and fear. Visions are not just intellectual experiences. They're meant to uplift a person's whole soul. The Lord uses then strong emotion to fully impress the reality of a message on somebody's mind, in their minds and in their hearts. Two examples. This is a detail out of Raphael's The Transfiguration of Jesus. And so we read in the scriptures from this event, Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John his brother, and bringeth them up into a high mountain apart, and was transfigured before them. And his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. And a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud, which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased, hear ye him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their face, and were sore afraid. It's not just fear, though. The other side, the joy, Lehi, as recorded by his son Nephi, and it came to pass that when my father had read and seen many great and marvelous things, he did exclaim many things unto the Lord, such as, Great and marvelous are thy works, O Lord God Almighty. And after this manner was the language of my father in the praising of his God, for his soul did rejoice, and his whole heart was filled, because of the things which he had seen, yea, which the Lord had shown unto him. This is one of the great virtues of visual media in education, is it's not only an intellectual experience. It can inspire a sacred awe, it can inspire strong emotion. And admittedly, that worries a lot of people, particularly educators, who want their students to have just the facts. And I understand that. I respect that. But emotional experiences are not necessarily only sentimental experiences. Emotional experiences are not necessarily trite. We can avoid sentimentality becoming a substitute for, instead of a partner with, a legitimate educational experience. So media that inspires this kind of awe, the way that we reconcile this is we build it on a strong message structure. So visions aren't just emotional, they're built on a strong foundation of doctrine and principle. And just like we see a skyscraper rising hundreds of feet into the air because of a strong internal framework, if we build media that has a strong foundation to it, a strong message structure, or a strong story structure, to use the inside terminology, it can inspire, you can use emotion and all of those elements that inspire emotion, like music, like visuals, visual effects, without it becoming just a sensationalistic display of emotion. What this would imply is that we would avoid media that has a didactic, preachy tone, that we would avoid stories or characters that are only meant to prove a point, that we would avoid black and white situations that don't reflect the reality of our own real lives, let alone our students' real lives. Any event that becomes stereotypical or cliche, we'll try to remove. I apologize in advance if you're a crier.
Mammy, quick, the thicket! Faster! Faster, Mammy! Don't look back! Keep running!
We made it! We made it, Mother! Wait. Mother!
Your mother can't be with you anymore.
first time they saw this scene. And for some, it's the only thing they remember out of the movie. What else happens in Bambi? No one seems to know. Except his mom dies. And there's a fire at the end. That's all we remember from the film. The point is that emotion actually drives the point home. Don't be afraid of it. Use it on a strong foundation to impress, like we do in visions, like the Lord does in visions, those points driving them right into people's hearts and into their minds. That leads right into the last principle of being spiritually demanding. And so for spiritually demanding, I've chosen one of the spiritually demanding visions we know about in the scriptures. This is a detail of Rembrandt's Abraham and Isaac. Visions are challenging. They're hard to understand. They don't simplify the doctrines of the gospel. They communicate, though, in rich symbolism, intricate detail that seemingly make it more difficult to get the point than a straightforward explanation would be. Even direct answers are often accompanied by visual imagery or figurative imagery. So Isaiah, in his vision of the heavenly courts, he's not just forgiven of his sins, but he sees this. Then flew one of the seraphim unto me, having a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with the tongs from off the altar, and he laid it upon my mouth, and said, Lo, this hath touched thy lips, and thine iniquity is taken away, and thy sin purged. Some kind of imagery going along with that message. I believe that visions are spiritually demanding and emotionally demanding and mentally demanding to give additional meaning to the verbal message being delivered. So people will reflect again and again on these symbols, with both the symbol and the message growing in meaning and growing in importance because of the effort again required to extract the lesson. Elder Bednar again said this, I have observed a common characteristic among those who have had the greatest influence in my life. They have helped me to seek learning by faith. They refused to give me easy answers to hard questions. In fact, they did not give me any answers at all. Rather, they pointed the way and helped me to take the steps to find my own answers. I certainly did not always appreciate this approach, but experience has enabled me to understand that an answer given by another person is usually not remembered for very long, if remembered at all. But an answer we discover or obtain through the exercise of faith typically is retained for a lifetime. And so if we want instructional media or visual media that is just as spiritually demanding, we should encourage them to ask their own questions. We should develop media that is challenging to analyze or interpret. And I realize this is different from the pitch that we sometimes make in our field, that we should use media because it's easier to understand than written explanations. And I don't want to deny the importance of that possibility as well. All I'm saying is let's approach all of the options, let's be open to all of the possibilities, and realize that in many cases, actually requiring people to work a little bit harder to extract the lesson is a good thing. Difficult media can help people internalize important topics, preparing them to understand meaningfully and apply those topics. And so again, this would suggest we don't select media that presents idealized storylines, that smooths out the unpredictability or uncertainty of just living in the world that we have, or that minimizes how difficult it is to grasp and understand some of the topics that we teach. We should choose rather narratively dense scenarios, scenarios that support multiple points of view, multiple options, that it's not always apparent at the front why a character is doing option A or option B, or even whether we should like this main character or not. In the movie The Social Network, maybe many of us saw it, who is Mark Zuckerberg? Is he kind of a jerk? Is he just a socially awkward old teenager? Or is he some kind of technology prophet of our modern age?
In the 16th email, you raised concerns about the site's functionality. Were you leading them on for 6 weeks?
No.
Then why didn't you raise any of these concerns before?
It's raining.
I'm sorry?
It just started raining.
Mr. Zuckerberg, do I have your full attention?
No.
Do you think I deserve it?
What?
Do you think I deserve your full attention?
I had to swear an oath before we began this deposition, and I don't want to perjure myself, so I have a legal obligation to say no.
Okay, no. You don't think I deserve your attention?
I think if your clients want to sit on my shoulders and call themselves tall, they have a right to give it a try, but there's no requirement that I enjoy sitting here listening to people lie. You have part of my attention. You have the minimum amount. The rest of my attention is back at the offices of Facebook, where my colleagues and I are doing things that no one in this room, including and especially your clients, are intellectually or creatively capable of doing. Did I adequately answer your condescending question?
I have 12:45.
Is he a jerk? Is he just committed to what he's trying to do? Now the same is true, the same outcomes can happen when we even embed our media, infuse it with rich symbolism or visual metaphor or a figurative analogy. Perhaps a couple of years ago, some of you saw a film, The Secret of Kells, where in this film, an animated film, meant for families, the symbol of writing, particularly scripture writing, becomes very, very important. So when the time comes for the main character to confront evil forces both within him and the world around him, this metaphor of writing, showing that he is maturing as a person, is equally important in illustrating how he accomplishes this. People draw their own conclusions about educational messages when we give them the opportunity to actually chew on it a little bit. When we give them the opportunity to maybe make a mistake and understand it differently from the teacher or the developer, or maybe not even make a mistake and just understand it differently. Media reaches millions of people, potentially even billions of people. Can we do the same things in our instructional media that these commercial filmmakers have done? That the scriptures, even in a very real sense, illustrate in how the Lord teaches through visions and other heavenly manifestations. 4 characteristics: intimate, not distant; participatory, not passive; a sense of sacred awe; and spiritually, mentally, and emotionally demanding. Imagine what we can do if we understand and grasp these principles and make them our own in this quest of preparing people's hearts so they can be converted again, not just to the gospel, but to any of the ideals that they're pursuing. Music, sports, entrepreneurial activities, any subject. Can we do the same for them as the Lord does for us through visions? I believe we can. I believe that is absolutely true. Thank you very much.
I really, really enjoy what you said here. I'm not familiar with any media that the church has put out recently that goes with this, besides maybe those Mormon messages. I kind of see them going that way. Are there plans to go kind of more in this direction, or is this just something that you're excited about?
Both. This is something I'm very excited about. If you've seen some of the recent campaigns like the Mormon.org campaign or messages, that's something where we're trying to be a little more, in every sense, a little more participatory, a little more intimate.
Yeah.
And how we're talking to people, participatory in the sense of allowing people to build their own and submit their own. Some of the other principles, truthfully, probably have a ways to go on. Cheryl.
Jason, the first principle about being intimate but not distant, how do you put that in the context of distance learning? And how can, what are your thoughts about
Sure.
how that can be, we can make distance learning intimate?
So the question is, how can we apply that first principle of intimacy and not distance to distance learning? Well, there's the first thing that comes to mind is that idea of transactional distance. That distance is not just a matter of how many miles away you are from somebody. That may be one component of it, but there are other factors, and I think I suggested a few in terms of how we speak about the subject, the language we use, whether it's a warm approach or we're psychologically distant as well. So I believe that if we're more physically distant, that just is a greater burden on us to lower some of those other elements of transactional distance as much as we can to compensate and make up for the fact that we're maybe not standing in front of someone directly.
Can I ask another
Yes.
question? it seems to me that a lot of this approach is kind of a push approach. I'm going to create media that has these 4 elements. What kind of preparation would people or students need in order to really fully benefit from this kind of media experience, do you think? Or what, I guess what I'm asking is, what could we do as instructors or designers to prepare people for this kind of media experience?
Yeah. First, let me just address the first comment you made. I chose a lot of movies because that's kind of what I chose, but I had 40 minutes. But if this was a course, there's a lot of other things we could go into where I believe these principles can, in classrooms and in teams and in other ways, all these characteristics can manifest themselves. To address the other half of your question, the only thing I can really say in short in the minute or so that we have is it's not so much the products. I believe it's got to be the system. It's got to be the environment. We have to attend to the whole thing. One-offs, we're probably going to face the reality that students will resist being asked to do a little bit more, just like they resist sometimes when they're being asked to invest more themselves. In other educational environments when the rest of the environment hasn't changed. We have to think of the whole system. We have to look at the whole system. Okay. Happy to entertain other questions one-on-one if you'd like, but thank you again. I always enjoy coming here.
Thank you, Jason.